Every city has a story. Cincinnati stretches from southwest Ohio to southeastern Indiana, across the river into northern Kentucky. I'm Megan O'Rourke.
And I'm Alexis Cruz. As America marks 250 years, we want to take a moment to reflect on the stories around the tri-state.
So over the next hour, we're going to guide you through just some of them.
We usually tell Cincinnati's history starting at the river, with settlers coming ashore in 1788. A little more than a decade after America declared independence. But if you really want to understand how far back this region goes, you have to look long before the city had a name.
Yeah, some of the very first stories we have to tell are documented about 25 miles south of where we stand today at the banks of the Ohio River.
Our first story is from Big Bone Lick State Historic Site.
Big Bone Lick is a paleontological site. It has a large historical significance centering around its paleontology and the geology of the site, as it has a natural salt spring. And so prior to European settlers coming in and discovering the area, it was really important to native fauna and the indigenous peoples that lived here as a source of nutrients and salt to preserve their food. After it was discovered, people then realized that they discovered these fossils that were preserved here so well that they were just poking out of the surface. There was fossils everywhere. And so then it became a proponent of, the idea of extinction and all these species that are no longer around. And it drew scientists from around the world, overseas and across the country, to see what was going on here at this site. A lick is a natural salt spring that rises up to the surface. Many people might be familiar with what a spring is. It's typically fresh water that comes out of the earth, and so a lick is just a saltier version of that. We usually call what comes out of a lick brine, and so that water, you have fresh water being forced down in through the limestone that's beneath our feet, and about 200 meters below the surface is a salt reservoir that was deposited during the Ordovician, when those shallow oceans evaporated and the sea level went down, and so you have all that salty water that's left behind. And then as it's compressed, more sediments being deposited, all that good stuff, water's forced down, it mixes with that salt and forces it back up to the surface, giving us salty water at the surface. But it's not just full of salt, it's full of other important micronutrients and a lot of nourishing minerals that things like herbivores would need in order to stay healthy. Because where predators are getting those nutrients from the things that they eat, herbivores aren't quite getting that same nutrients, and so they need to supplement it from other sources. And so you have all of these herbivores that are coming here to eat. Well, then the predators are like, oh my gosh, there's a tasty snack over there. And so the predators are coming here to eat what's eating or licking the salt. And then you also have humans coming in that have realized that they can use this salt in order to preserve their food, as well as nutrients to nourish themselves. And so they're coming here to gather salt to take back to their villages. They would also use this as an opportunity to hunt and procure meat that they would then preserve for their journey back home. When Thomas Jefferson first came here and discovered the teeth from the American mastodon, and we have some examples inside, they have these tall cusps on them, and that's how the American mastodon actually got its name, mast meaning breast, and so they call it the breast tooth. But it kind of looks like a carnivore tooth in a way, just it has those really tall cusps that look like it would be for eating meat. And before he sent Lewis and Clark out on their expedition across the West, he was like, you guys really need to watch out. There is this giant predator that is lurking in the woods. It was called the Great Incognitum. And so they thought it was this mysterious predator that was lurking in the woods. And today we know it, just this huge mastodon. So the thought that this giant mastodon is just, sneaking through the woods waiting to pounce. When bones were discovered, Thomas Jefferson was a big proponent of the natural sciences. He was always so interested in paleontology itself. And before this time, there had never really been a whole lot of systematic digging that's been going on and collection of fossils across North America. It's all still pretty new. We were a very new country at this time. There was a lot of things going on. And so as researchers are coming in to discover what is going on at Big Bone Lick. Thomas Jefferson led the first organized dig, because before that and even after it, people would come and they would just take a couple fossils and go, and whether that would be to study or just for personal interest. But Thomas Jefferson got a whole crew together, got equipment together, and said, we're going to collect as much as we can and we're going to study it. And so there were several fossils that he had sent to New York, to England, back to his own estate in Virginia. And so that's why we're called the birthplace of North American vertebrate paleontology, because it was the first organized excavation of vertebrate fossils in North America.
The birthplace of North American vertebrate paleontology, right in our backyard.
Cincinnati's first didn't stop there. In 1869, the city changed America once again.
Baseball was still a young game played by amateurs in open fields across America.
But a group of men right here in Cincinnati had a different idea. They decided to pay their players, recruit the best in the country, and win.
They went 57-0, and they didn't just win games, they made baseball famous.
This is the story of the Cincinnati Red Stockings and how a team from Cincinnati helped build America's pastime.
The power of baseball in Cincinnati, when you think about all the communities and how we were the melting pot of immigrants from Ireland and Germany and everywhere came here. In Cincinnati, it's the thread that holds this community together. It really is. Back then, baseball was just getting started, but to have the innovation, the people in charge of the amateur team here in Cincinnati to think ahead and be proactive and try to grow with this growing city of Cincinnati was really important. So the Red Stockings Association here in Cincinnati decided we're going to pay all the players. We're going to go out and get the best ones, bring them to Cincinnati. And it really changed the game forever. They practiced, they worked hard, they were determined, and all that came through, and all they did was win. They won 57 games, didn't lose any that year, and actually with a team that made baseball famous. But I think of baseball as the ultimate kind of bonder of communities. Even today, it's one of the great bonding influences. People come to a ballpark just to celebrate, everything that is great about the game. I mean, they can get away from their life, and that's what baseball's always done. That's why it's become the national pastime. It's the first popular sport for people to go out, socialize, and watch a game. It's part of our freedom. It's part of, trying to promote equality throughout the years. Opening day parade means something to everybody because you had the town rallying around their Cincinnati Reds, and that I think is probably the first time where it's like they took ownership in this club, and the fans have supported the club ever since. It's a part of Cincinnati. It's part of the fabric of everything we have here. And opening day and the parade and the festivities today really come from those days in the 1890s. Love opening day. It is an unofficial holiday, I guess you could look at it. We are the only team to be given the ability to start every game, the season at home. The story of the 1869 Red Stockings is pretty spectacular. This map illustrates how the team traveled across the country. Very hard to do in 1869. Went 57-0. The highest scoring games represented here. The most important thing that I like to say is they're the team that made baseball famous. And if you would open up a newspaper across the country, what you would find is their name, their stats, their bylines, and you could follow them. Imagine baseball, all-day games. If you worked, it's tough to go to a game. So if you're Pal Crosley and you're running a ballpark and you're trying to get people in the stands, what are you going to do? How do we play at night? May 24th, 1935, the first official night game in history was taking place, pro baseball history, here at Crosley Field. So it did open up the doors for people of any background and any job to go down and watch the Reds play. Opened in 1912. We hear great stories about how green the grass was, the smell of the food and the concessions and cigarette smoke and beer. So not always great smells, but wonderful crowd. People would dress up a lot to go to these games. You had the sun deck, moon deck out in right field here, and it was just this iconic ballpark that still today resonates in so many people's hearts and minds. So when you think of Cincinnati, two things come to mind. maybe 3. First professional team, people know that, but then they say the Big Red Machine. That's worldwide. The team developed because it knew how to adapt. That's the key, right? In baseball is adjusting, adapting. And this is the beauty of the Big Red Machine. It didn't matter where they came from, okay? This is what we talk about all the time. Didn't matter their talents, they were all different, they had different egos, they come from different parts of the world, but all they did was bond together for one common cause, and that was to win. So we often say that the dugout's a metaphor for our culture. The Big Red Machine could have been the bust, because they had lost the World Series in 70 and 72. So come 75, if they don't win it this time, there may not have been a 76. But it all finally came together. People now know who the Cincinnati Reds are by the way they played, by their personalities, but most of all, by how many games they won. So back-to-back World Series championships definitely solidified them as one of the greatest teams in baseball history. Culture, chemistry, character, right? All those things. I mean, those all play into it. I mean, you look back at the Big Red Machine, it was about chemistry, and it was about the culture that they had. In today's game, I think people are really focused on culture. Ellie De La Cruz, great example, comes in, doesn't speak the language really well, but he speaks baseball language. And they all think about baseball the same way. One common goal, baseball brings it together, America's pastime. And they hire Lou Piniella to come in and take over what people call Pete's team. Even Lou would say, who's an inductee in 2026, it's a Hall of Fame, said, that was Pete's team, but he changed it and developed it. It was his personality that he brought to the club and fired him up from day one. They go wire to wire that year and went on to the playoffs, beat the Pirates in the playoffs, and then beat the Oakland A's in a 4-game sweep of the World Series, something that nobody thought would ever happen. Throughout history, the Reds have been on the forefront of so many innovations. The game gets better every time it learns from itself. That's why recognizing history is so important. If we don't know where we've been, we're never going to move forward. But in general, I think baseball led the way, and with belief that sports, if taught in the right way, and you've got the right positive influences, can bring out the best character. It actually reveals character, but it can be America's greatest classroom too. When you saw that people could get along on the baseball field, it set the example for others to say, well, if we can do it there, we can do it here. So baseball gets a lot of credit for that. In Cincinnati, it's the thread that holds this community together. It really is. And when we win, and we will win again in a big way, it's going to be crazy.
Cincinnati is no stranger to championships, and the next one feels closer every year.
It's not just the Reds keeping Cincinnati in the record books. Just down the street, the Bengals continue to keep the Tri-State on their toes.
And in the historic West End neighborhood, FC Cincinnati has built one of the most passionate fan bases in all of Major League Soccer in just 10 years.
We're not just a sports town, though. We're a region filled with something for everyone.
From the roar of the jungle to Jungle Jim's International Market, there's something for everyone to take a bite out of. Since 1972, adrenaline junkies have flocked to Kings Island to get their fix. But just across the Ohio-Indiana state line sits the Lawrenceburg Speedway, where Saturday nights start when you hear the engines rev. In Cincinnati, we know speed. Every spring, tens of thousands of piggies hit the pavement. You'll find fans marching the streets of the West End anytime FC Cincinnati is at home. Supporters fill the Bailey, one of the most exciting atmospheres in all of sports. Looking for something even more unique? How about the Venthaven Museum in Fort Mitchell, the only museum in the world dedicated to the art of ventriloquism? The surprises don't stop there. You can stop by the American Sign Museum in Camp Washington and get lost in the sea of neon, or learn about life under the sea at the Newport Aquarium. From great parks to food festivals, there's something for everyone in the Tri-State.
Everyone has a story about their favorite spot in town,
Which for many is the Cincinnati Zoo, whose own story is more than 150 years old.
On the other side of this break, we'll show you why Cincinnati is a zoo town. The Cincinnati Zoo's story starts with immigrants from Germany with a vision for a new place they called home.
Yeah, what they built still stands today, leaving a mark on history and keeping us excited for the future.
It took 2 or 3 years to build the zoo on this very campus. It was started by German immigrants that were industrialists, led by Andrew Erkenbrecher, and they wanted to bring some of the old world to the new world. So I've not been to Germany, but friends who've been to Stuttgart Zoo, Frankfurt Zoo, say our zoo feels a lot like those still. It was founded originally as the Cincinnati Zoological Garden, and though we have a different name now, we're still a garden. We've been a garden all that time. Their purpose was to create a beautiful urban garden that was a break from, there wasn't a lot between here and the river, a lot of plants. It was just filled up with buildings jam-packed, saying over the Rhine, not very many trees. They wanted to have exotic animals and they wanted to have cultural events. And they did that like crazy. The Cincinnati Opera was started here, and it was outdoors in the summer for 53 years. Now, just imagine, Vine Street's a main thoroughfare, and it was then, but it was mud. And this was a farm prior, owned by the Blakely family, and it was a place that farmers would walk their pigs from out in the country, and they'd station them here. And then when the word got out they were ready down on a steamboat down on the river, they'd walk them all the way to the river, and then they'd take them from there to St. Louis or Louisville or whatever. And Cincinnati was known as Porkopolis. When people went out, they went out. So women came to the zoo, great big dresses. Men would be dressed up sometimes in like wool suits, certainly for the opera, but even just for the Sunday visit, which is crazy when you consider how hot it gets here, but that's how people did it. We have the oldest building at any zoo in America, our reptile house. It's had animals in it on public display every day since 1875. Our other building that was here at the beginning is our passenger pigeon memorial. It was originally one of 7 pagodas that was part of our bird run, where they had different bird species. And we kept it as a museum as a tribute to Martha, the last passenger pigeon. That species went extinct here at this zoo in 1914. And so it's a real wonderful museum about her. Another species, the Carolina parakeet, that also went extinct here later that decade, and the importance for conservation. We have a great big reproductive research program. We have a dozen PhD reproductive biologists that work there. Most famous of their program was in the 1990s into this century with the Sumatran rhino. We're the only zoo that ever figured out how to feed them and take care of them. They're a very fragile species, and we're the only zoo that ever figured out how to breed them. Dr. Terry Roth, who runs that program, took a number of years studying the estrus cycle in order to get them to be able to breed in captivity. So successful that we sent our offspring back to live in Sumatra. And they're in a protected area, and we still work with them. And they are probably the most endangered mammal in the world, but people haven't given up. We're still going to try to save them. If you come here, you will have experiences, you will have fun, and when you go back to your family, you will say you would not believe what happened. Like Cincinnati, we're overachievers. Cincinnati sort of does everything like a Pete Rose head first slide, and our zoo does that. Every town has a zoo, but not every town's a zoo town. Cincinnati's a zoo town. If I go from Cleves or out by Indiana, out to Terrace Park, heck, to Dayton or Lexington, we're the zoo for those places. Every family has a story about the zoo. Their kids went to school here, their kids went to zoo camp, one of them became a veterinarian, or they got involved with conservation. Sometimes I'll play a trick if I'm asked to go speak somewhere, and I'll say, well, before I tell my story, anybody got a zoo story from your family? And everybody has one, everywhere. West side, east side, so it's sweet. We've been here a long time, and we're very plugged in with the community, so that's nice. Cincinnati style, we're out there telling the story.
A zoo town full of overachievers. Our region has never been content with good enough.
And nowhere is that more clear than in medicine. Our region is home to some of the finest healthcare institutions in the country and the world. And when the moment called for it, they answered.
On January 2nd, 2023, the World Watchman Damar Hamlin's heart stopped on the field at Paycor Stadium.
Healthcare professionals at the University of Cincinnati brought him back to life. And when he woke up, he asked who won the game.
In Cincinnati, Damar Hamlin won the game of life. That is Cincinnati medicine, and that story is just the start.
The easy thing to point to is the care of Mr. Damar Hamlin after his injury. And he was, very badly injured during an NFL football game. He had outstanding care. It took teams, and it took many teams of individuals to help bring him back to health. And I would include our emergency medicine physicians, EMS, our specialized nurses, our critical care personnel, our respiratory therapists, and our rehab personnel to get him back to health. That was an amazing moment, but it really encapsulates what we actually do every day. And even as we speak, there's a team working on a very injured patient in the operating room here, getting the same care that Mr. Hamlin gave.
Cincinnati is, has a very unique vantage point in the sense that we have world-class adult and pediatric healthcare. We have innovators in the healthcare field. We have multiple successful, well-serving health systems, and we are able to draw and attract talent in the field of medicine, the field of healthcare, very competitive with cities like Chicago or Houston.
We were the first medical school west of the Alleghenies. We were where the polio vaccine began, right? Invented right here. We were, and I'm biased, the first emergency medicine residency ever. So this is where the specialty of emergency medicine began. The team that led to the discovery of TPA for stroke, the blood clot dissolver that so dramatically changed the way we treat stroke, led from right here. So many, many firsts, and of course one of our most famous firsts, Benadryl, was invented right here.
The hospital was created back in 1889 when James Gamble, the founder of Procter & Gamble, gave a very philanthropic donation to buy a 10-bed rooming house down in York Street. And he challenged us 137 years ago to make sure that we brought the best clinicians, the best nurses, the best support team, all to bear on this community. And I think we've stayed true to that mission and to his challenge that we would always serve this community in a way that would make it such that people could live here, they could work here, they could play here, and they would always have the finest health care anywhere in the nation.
We were founded just 3 months before the first shots were fired in the Civil War. It was a time of social and political turmoil, and in the midst of all of that, Henrietta Cleveland opened a small 10-bed hospital on 7th Street in Covington to care for the most vulnerable and the poor in our community.
It was really started by 4 Sisters of Charity who also served as nurses in the Civil War. And they made such a huge impact that Archbishop Purcell said, I want to start a Catholic hospital here in Cincinnati with these 4 sisters. And so they chose the image of the Good Samaritan because they wanted that to be the symbol that lets people know that every single person is welcomed, every single person is cared for, and no one will be turned away.
I feel that I, my family, the next generation, we're meant to be here. This is our America just as much it is the America of German immigrants or Catholic immigrants or even, transatlantic slaves that were forced to come here, is that we've made a rich life for ourselves. We've excelled in the professions of whether it be medicine, education, or civic engagement through service in other ways. But at the same time, we've made it our home, and a home that we love and care for.
Health, community, and freedom. This region has always been the center of all three.
The National Underground Railroad Freedom Center exists to preserve the stories of those who fought to end slavery, and it sits right here on the Ohio River.
We're going to hear some of that story next.
Woody Keon Jr. is the President and Chief Operating Officer here at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. Thanks for joining us for the special.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
What a beautiful background for our special today. And my first question to you is, what is the significance of the location of the Freedom Center?
Well, let's start with the context of the Ohio River. It was a geographic boundary between the North and the South, but it also was symbolic from the standpoint that it represented a passageway, a barrier to freedom for so many people. So we start with that, and then the Freedom Center, over on this side, people were free. On the southern side, people were enslaved, and they could see it, so you could look across the river. But the important thing here is that on this side of the river, there were 3 African-American settlements here, and the location that we're in right now there was a free African-American settlement called Little Africa. So our building is built right into the middle of that settlement here on the banks of the Ohio River. There were two other settlements, Bucktown and Little Bucktown, where free African Americans had to develop this community and help build the economy of the Cincinnati area.
And you mentioned the river being a significant part, right? So for those who crossed over to the river, freedom wasn't guaranteed. That was just the beginning. Can you explain how the Freedom Center kind of paints a picture of that complexity of how the journey didn't just stop at the river?
Slavery was the law of the land. And so it was embedded in our laws, our constitutions and so forth. And there was a law passed called the Fugitive Slave Law. So enslaved people were considered to be chattel property. And so the law, this Fugitive Slave Law, allowed people to come in. If someone escaped and became free, got across the river, then it allowed slave catchers to come across the river, find them, and take them back into Kentucky or wherever they felt like they belonged to their owners. And so what people felt when they got here was you could never be free. So many people just kind of kept moving to the north through various communities through this area, and all the way, some of them went all the way up to Canada.
So we talked about the significance of the river, trying to get over here, trying to stay here and move north, whether they were passing through. What's the significance of the eternal flame behind us?
The eternal flame, it's really a symbolic gesture in terms of it represents hope. We put that there to basically represent the hope and aspirations of people who can look across and aspire for freedom around the world. And what we say about that, our internal flame, is that it will burn until everybody in the world is free. So that's what it represents, and we keep it running 24/7.
I have to tell you, standing here talking to you, learning about the history, I feel something inside, right? Mm-hmm. Just kind of a presence of this significance, not only of Cincinnati, but mm-hmm. this building and everything that you guys have here. Right. So as we celebrate America's 250th birthday, people who visit the Freedom Center, what would you like them to take away with their experience or any piece of knowledge that you hope they leave with?
Well, I hope we would inspire them to learn more about our nation's history and seek a complete understanding of our nation's history, the good and the bad. And also we want people to walk away with a stronger feeling of civic responsibility, because each generation has a responsibility to take this quest for freedom forward. Every generation has a responsibility to do that. So I want people to have the courage to act, to do some things, to do whatever they can within their area of influence and control to help us achieve the freedom that the whole country is looking for our community and our world.
Cincinnati's Union Terminal is one of the region's most treasured landmarks. So Cody Hefner is here from the Cincinnati Museum Center, housed inside Union Terminal. Thanks so much for talking with us this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so can you just tell me a little bit about the history and how the Museum Center and Union Terminal has served as a gateway?
Yeah, Union Terminal opened in 1933 and was one of the last grand train stations built because it wanted to bring people to Cincinnati. It wanted to become this hub. And then shortly afterwards, you have World War II, and suddenly you have millions of soldiers passing through Union Terminal over the course of 4 years during the war. Some estimates, 1 out of every 5 service members, American service members, passed through Union Terminal during the war. So you have this tremendous influx of troops from all over the country coming into Cincinnati, even if only briefly, during the war. And then after the war, all these people returning home, and along with them, immigrants and refugees from the war come into Cincinnati as well.
What did all these people do for work once they settled here then?
Really a variety. I mean, Cincinnati has such a long history of manufacturing, beer brewing, pork packing. It really was kind of on the forefront of industry and opportunity in the West at the time the city was founded, and that's continued through today. And now we've seen that manufacturing hub kind of transition into sort of this tech hub or this startup hub, and that is powered by immigrants throughout the city's 200 plus years.
Obviously, we're standing here on the banks of the Ohio River. You can't talk about Cincinnati. How has the river helped to shape our city?
It's what's drawn people to the Cincinnati region for centuries. I mean, it's not only a river city, it's a 4-river city, because you have the Ohio, you have the Licking, and you have the Great and Little Miami rivers. So indigenous people flocked here because the rivers become this highway. It's how they can move people and goods throughout the region, but it also attracted animals here. So as people are hunting, it leads them to this area. It's got fertile farmland, so it is ripe to support populations and communities. And then as more industry moves west following the Revolutionary War, it just floats right down the Ohio River here in Cincinnati, and then from there it can go down the Mississippi to this bustling port of New Orleans, or it can go further into the interior. Cincinnati really becomes this doorstep to the interior of the country at the time.
How has that changed then over the years?
Well, you get railroads, and that starts to pull people away from the river because you're not as dependent on the river to move goods and services and people. And that railroad history continues. Cincinnati is still home to one of the busiest rail yards in the country. That's how much freight continues to flow through here. And then you get the advent of the automobile and the highway system, and Cincinnati just becomes this nexus. I mean, even today, $1 billion of freight crosses the Brent Spence Bridge every single day. But you still have river traffic as well. You still have barges moving coal and oil and gypsum and other materials up and down the river. So the history of Cincinnati is shaped by the river, shaped by transportation as it continues to evolve.
Cody, thanks for that insight on how we became who we are today. Our coverage of America's 250th continues right after this. Cincinnati's nightlife has always stood out, not just in the region, but the country as well. And no one knows that better than the king of fine dining himself, whose own love for the Reds brought him here.
I came in from New Jersey. Cincinnati, the people of this city embraced me. They supported me, they accepted me, they put up with me, they let me be me. I came to this town because I was a Reds fan, and I was supposed to start in Syracuse. The Holiday Inn started, they recruited me out of Cornell. I said, I want to start in Cincinnati. He said, why? And that's where their corporate headquarters was, Weingarten Hammonds, it was Cincinnati. I said, because I'm a Reds fan. You're a Reds fan, you're born and raised in Jersey. How did you become a Reds fan? I said, never mind, I'm a Reds fan. I one day wanted to have a restaurant, that was my plan. I did not know that Johnny Bench and Pete Rose were going to make it possible for me to have the precinct. They backed me, they believed in me, they believed in my vision. Lucy's in the Sky was incredible. That's where a lot of these guys got to know me and why they backed me at the precinct. Spanky's was in Sharonville. Dr. Potts was at the Holiday Inn Riverfront. Lucy's was at the top of the Holiday Inn on 8th and Lane. None of those are Holiday Inns anymore, but that's where I got to be known. And then Bench and Rose, and because they were in, some other guys got in that I didn't know, and they backed me at the precinct. Fine dining to me is living theater. They don't come to our restaurants because they're hungry. They can go to the refrigerator if they're hungry. They come to our restaurants to celebrate life, to celebrate an occasion, to recruit somebody in the company or a sports team, or just an anniversary, a graduation, a birthday, but they come to celebrate, not to eat. But I made the precinct for the first time. There was an upscale steakhouse in Cincinnati. There wasn't one. And I broke all the rules of the steakhouse rule book, because I hired females, I catered to, I designed the place for females. Women felt out of place at some of these New York steakhouses and Chicago steakhouses, you know. And in fact, they didn't cater to women back then. You know, you had all male waiters, you had all male employees. I named the waterfront after the movie On the Waterfront. I should have named it Titanic. I didn't know. An iceberg in Covington, Kentucky, go figure. An iceberg, that hit it. We had 5 bars, 3 restaurants. We had an outdoor tropical resort called Las Brisas with a rock formation and swimming pool, and people could have a drink in the water. There was nothing like it anywhere in the country, and there'll never be anything like it again. So I owe everything to the people of Cincinnati. I moved here in 1970, and I never went back. 56 years, I kind of like it here.
Just across the river, northern Kentucky has left its own mark on history. As the landscape has changed, the people's desire to give back to their home never has.
Look around now. It's turned into a whole different place.
Newport really shouldn't be standing. We lost a large number of employers, and they were large employers. So Newport was a blue-collar union town. And we had the Newport Steel, Interlake Steel originally, then Newport Steel, which had thousands of employees. We had George Wiedemann Brewery, which had a large number of employees. And we had Palm Beach, which has a large number. So we had thousands and thousands of high-paying blue-collar jobs that went away. So what you was left behind, we had a whole bunch of bars, a whole lot of strip clubs.
We pushed for adult entertainment legislation. We pushed for a historic district, one of the biggest, I think the second biggest historic district in the state of Kentucky. And some of those things started to snowball and improve.
And the city thought, you know, well, let's take this and we'll turn this into a complex, into a venue where people will want to come, visit the city of Newport, see what it's got to offer, how great it is here.
Newport and the levee set a tone that Newport is coming back.
We want to live a better life. We want a better place. We want this better for our children, and everybody wants these things. But we actually did something about it.
Newport's got that can-do attitude. They're small enough, and they can move quick enough, and they can transfer and make things happen pretty quickly if they really want.
The people here believe in me, and I believe in them. But these people want to change, and who doesn't want to work for somebody that's on the same page as you and want to stop crime and want to move things forward and make a place a great place?
One thing that's ingrained into history on both sides of the river, Cincinnati chili. Everyone has their favorite shop, and while the recipe may change ever so slightly at each place, the love that goes into it is consistent across the board.
My dad came from Greece in 1951. They left a war-torn country with nothing, and coming to a strange land, not knowing to speak the language, and having to change your name, which is crazy. My dad's real name is Ioannis Ioannou. He came over and had to change it to John Johnson, which is so American, but beautiful. Only in America can you do that.
My grandfather, Papa Nick, which is right over here on the wall, immigrated to our beautiful country in 1915 from Greece, and he started Dixie Chili in 1929. He did it the year that the stock market crashed at the end of the Great Depression. So you can only imagine the type of economic turmoil the country was in. And he had a lot of resilience and a lot of blood, a lot of sweat, a lot of tears of trying to start something that would last.
Well, the recipe itself is a blend of 13 secret spices that has not changed since 1965. I still recall the days of my uncle blending them by hand, and we actually still have that spice room under lock and key. You know, our spices are sourced from all over the world. Our spices are as diverse as the country is. And at the end of the day, I think, you know, our flavor profile is more of an orchestra of flavor. It's not just a one-note kind of experience.
We do grind our own beef daily. We make it fresh every day, never frozen, and no preservatives. And I think because we still do things the old-fashioned way, even chopping the onions by hand and throwing them in the mix, really sets us apart, and you can taste the difference.
We're the first in Cincinnati to have a 6-way. First in Cincinnati to have the No Freaking Way, which is our eating contest, which is 8 pounds of food you have to eat within 60 minutes. We've been very creative over the years trying to come up with different things for chili. One night, we received a phone call about 7:30 at night in one of the restaurants, and it was actually Food Network calling us. And at first I thought, well, there's no way Food Network's calling me, a little Blue Ash chili sitting on a corner in Blue Ash, but sure enough it was. It's a gathering place, and we like to bring families together for generations.
Yep.
And that's kind of where we sit today.
Yeah.
We've had some people get off the
Right off the plane.
and then they come right into the restaurant there in Erlanger, and they'll say, hey Mark, if you see me tonight, you have to act like you haven't seen me. Because sometimes they come to the restaurant before they see their family. So then they'll come up later. So I was like, my lips are sealed.
I think it's more than a restaurant. It's more than a food.
becomes a part of your family experience, and it's something we as Cincinnatians take pride in, and we want to share with our family members. And so you just hear story after story of people being introduced by their family and friends and then wanting to share it with their family and friends. I mean, it's a real privilege to represent this brand, and we really view ourselves as stewards, because if you don't think about it as the people's brand, then you're looking at it the wrong way, because this is theirs, just like the baseball team and the football team. It's for all of Cincinnati, and without the raving fans, we wouldn't be here.
It's truly the American dream, kind of that immigration story of coming to the United States for economic opportunity. This country has given so much to my family. I love the fact that we're able to give it back.
They landed here, and it was a city that was built on immigrants, and you had a real melting pot of cultures and a willingness to try foods from different heritages. We hear a lot about our German background in Cincinnati, but we also had a pocket of people come from Macedonia. In the census in the 20s, there were hundreds of Macedonians living along 5th Street in downtown. And it really grew from there. But it's a comfort food, and we were a blue-collar town, and I think the fit was perfect for our style of people.
My dad believed in the American dream, and he is actually the perfect example of that dream, like coming to America, working hard, doing things the right way, and you will succeed. When we celebrated our 75th anniversary, the corner was renamed to Johnny Johnson Way. So when you go outside, you will see his name is up there forever.
Whether you're marking America's 250th with a Coney, a Reds game, or a trip to the zoo, remember, this is a home we built together. A home that will stand for another 250 years, as long as we continue to do what Cincinnati has always done. We started as a city of firsts, and we'll keep leaving our mark on history. Thanks for joining us.